Good morning, Rose Red Homestead, on this, for us, very snowy day. We've had more snow this winter than we have in the 12 winters that we have lived here. And we are actually thrilled because we have needed, we're in a 1,200-year drought. And so every little bit will help. As you know, I have been working on, well, as I think you may know, I have been working on a bread book for baking bread for survival. And it is going to include pretty much basic recipes that we can master now before a time when the grid may go down and we don't want to worry about having to learn brand new things because we'll already have some really basic bread ideas mastered. And so one of the things that I want to talk about today is the difference between mixing and kneading in a stand mixer. Now, you may think it's a little bit strange that I'm doing something that will be powered by electricity, but many people do have alternative power sources. I know that we do. I know that several people do. And if you don't, then you can just do it by hand. But if you're going to use a stand mixer at any time, whether the grid is up or the grid is down and you are using an auxiliary power source, there are some things about stand mixers that can be just a little bit, not confusing, but they can trip you up if you don't know for sure what is happening. When you use a stand mixer, the breaks between mixing and kneading blend all together because the machine is doing the work and maybe you're busy doing other things. It's happened to me many times. And so I'm trying to be more mindful about things, and I thought maybe I would just share this with you. So I have here two identical sets of ingredients. Now, the recipe today is not important. This happens to be a rye bread recipe that I'm working on, and I'm not ready to share the recipe because it is still in progress, and I do quite a bit of work on bread recipes before I'm ready to release them. Some stand mixers say to add the dry ingredients to the mixer bowl and then add the wet. My Ankarsrum says exactly the opposite. So we're going to do it first in the KitchenAid, putting the dry ingredients first and go through the mixing process. And then we're going to do an autolyse. An autolyse is very important, very useful when you are working with any kind of a whole grain, because it is a rest period. Think of an autolyse as a rest period. So we're going to mix, and then we're going to stop, and we're going to autolyse. We're going to let the dough rest for 20 minutes. Then we're going to come back and we're going to knead. But knowing where that break point is really important. So I'm just going to pick this bowl right here, and all right, so I'm going to dump the flour in first, which is what this stand mixer calls for. And then I'm going to apply the bread hook and then lift it up. Okay, we are ready to go. Now, the dry ingredients included bread flour, rye flour, and some caraway seeds, and then the yeast and salt. Now I'm going to add the liquid slowly, and Jim is going to watch what happens inside the bowl on low power with the dough hook when we start the mixing. So here's low power, and here's the liquid a little at a time. I'm wanting it to pick up all of the flour before we stop. Okay, notice how the dough is sticking to the sides of the bowl. So we are not in kneading yet at all. So I'm going to stop this, and then we're going to now put it in autolyse. And the way that we do that is with this very shaggy dough. We're just now going to put a plastic bag over it and let it sit just like that for 20 minutes. Ankarsrum is a little bit different. Here's the dough hook on the Ankarsrum, and it goes like this inside the bowl. And it works okay. I've watched several videos from the Ankarsrum company. Here's the other alternative, is just this wheel. And what they say is use both until you figure out which one you personally like better. I like this one better, so that's the one that we're going to use today. If you have an Ankarsrum, I suggest that you watch those same videos. Just do a Google search on Ankarsrum bread hook, and those videos will all come up. So here's how you set it up. The Ankarsrum has a bowl scraper that goes right here. And then you bring the wheel over and lock it into place that way. And then for mixing, which is what we're going to be doing, it goes in about the middle of the bowl. For kneading, it goes someplace else, and I'll show you what that is. Also, the Ankarsrum says to pour the liquid in first, so we are going to do that. And again, that's honey and oil and water, and that is it. I got a little bit up here. Let me see if I can just get that off. It's pretty good. All right, now on low speed, we just turn to mix, which is 1 notch over. And then we add a little at a time the dry ingredients. On the Ankarsrum, it is the bowl that turns. All right, so you see it's getting mixed up. I love that scraper. For years I had to scrape the KitchenAid when it was doing its thing. I still have to get in once in a while with a spatula. You know, it's pretty much picked up all the flour. And if I were going to go straight into the kneading cycle, I could do it right now, but I'm not. We're going to autolyse this. And to autolyse this, I'm simply going to cover the entire mixer. Poke that in place, and then we will leave this one to rest for 20 minutes. So we still have 10 minutes left on the KitchenAid, so we'll be back when the KitchenAid is ready for the next step. Okay, our 20 minutes is up, so let's look to see how this dough looks. What happens during autolyse is that the flour is softened, particularly the whole grain flour is softened, and the bran pieces that are sharp little things, the edges are softened, and so the gluten is getting started. Now, we are still very much in the mixing phase of this, so I'm going to connect it back. And we very well may need some more flour, because before we can start kneading, the dough has to clear the bowl. All right, so do you see how it is peanut butter-like consistency at the bottom? That is not kneading. So I'm going to add a little bit more bread flour. Rye has a very weak gluten, and so rather than adding rye flour, I want to add bread flour that will help with developing the gluten. On this KitchenAid, is the sides of the bowl being clean to where every little scrap has been picked up. I don't always achieve that, but that's what I would very much like to see. There's still a little bit of that peanut butter consistency at the very, very bottom. All right, this is what I've had to do with my KitchenAid to get a good knead time after time. There's just something about the way this dough hook works that seems to get that dough to where it is not a good mixture. So when that happens, I mean, it's just not reaching the point where it's ready to knead. It's nice and soft, so that's good. So I am just going to give it a little bit of a hand knead here and make sure. See, now when we're kneading, we know for sure that everything is all mixed. In a stand mixer, we need to have this complete little ball separate and distinct, and then the dough hook needs to whack it against the side of the bowl to get the kneading in. So we're going to try that again. I'm just going to put a little bit of flour on the bottom here, and we'll see if we can get the KitchenAid to do its thing. The little brown specks you are seeing are caraway seeds for the rye bread. All right, let's try this again. I'm just going to keep it on low. All right, that's what kneading should look like in the KitchenAid. I'm going to keep it low, so it is pushing it against the side somewhat. All right, so we're going to let that go for probably 7 or 8 minutes. I am seeing once again the reason that I did not buy a new KitchenAid when this one started to go out. And if you look at that dough hook, you will see that the dough is riding the hook like a merry-go-round. It's not getting much kneading done at all, and it still has that little peanut butter consistency at the bottom. So I have added already an extra half a cup of flour. I'm going to disturb the hydration of this recipe if I keep adding flour. So I'm going to just go ahead and turn this out on the counter, and I'm going to finish kneading this by hand. Now, we will know, I guess one question is, how do you know when a dough has been kneaded enough? Well, a couple of things. First, you want it to be elastic and as smooth as possible. And of course, we've got seeds in this one. Another thing that you can do is that you can pull a chunk. If it tears rather than pulls, rather than kind of stretches, it's not ready yet. And so we're going to I'm just going to knead this probably for about 10 more minutes. Now, I would not hesitate to do that with a stand mixer if the stand mixer wasn't doing the right thing for the bread. If you try to bake a bread that is not fully kneaded, it's not going to rise as high and the crumb will be funky. So we need to be sure that when we're going after gluten, that we develop that gluten to be able to form the pockets. The autolyse, when we let it sit for 20 minutes, one of the purposes there was to soften the edges of the bran. And because those sharp edges on the bran will sever the strands of gluten. So here we go. We'll come back when I'm satisfied that this has been fully kneaded. So kneading is squishing and pinching and battering the dough, beating it up. And for it just to ride around on the dough hook doesn't do a thing. So I've been kneading it for, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes. And see, now that's very much more stretchy than breaking. I really have liked my KitchenAid. I don't want to bash the KitchenAid. It was my favorite mixer for years and years, probably 30, maybe 40 years. But I just got tired of having to pull bread out and do exactly what I'm showing you because it wasn't actually kneading. Now, sometimes it does a good job with kneading, but the bread hook needs to have the dough kind of behind it so that as it twists and turns, is pushing it up against the side of the bowl and beating it up a little bit. So I've cleaned this bowl, oiled it, and we're just now gonna let this start its first rise. And let's get on to the Ankarsrum, see how it's doing. All right, let's see how this one turned out. Oh, very soft. Woo. I may have to add more flour to this one as well. Okay, so we're going to just turn on to the mix stage and let it do its thing for a minute, see if we've still got mixing, and we can go to kneading. All right, I believe that we do. So here's what we do for kneading. We release the arm and move it over to the side to where there's about an inch. So what we want to see is that dough moving between the roller and the side. And once it has to squeeze through that, sometimes the dough rides this roller as well, and I have to pull it loose. But let's see what this dough does. Now see, that is kneading when it is squishing that dough between the roller and the side. So we have some dough in the middle. Let's see if we have to add any flour to get that picked up. No, it seems to be doing okay. Okay. So I am going to put just a little bit of flour in the bottom. So you see that the dough is getting rolled and turned and squished. So that's a good knead. So now that we're sure that we're into kneading time, I'm going to turn it up and set the timer for about 8 minutes. And we will come back after it has done its thing. We are probably in the last minute or two of this kneading, and you can see what I mean by clean the sides of the bowl. The sides and the bottom are clean. The dough picks up everything. And I think that this is done. I don't need to wait until the buzzer goes off. The dough is talking to me. It's telling me I can look at it and see. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it off. And we're going to just take it out and give it a little test. I usually have to clean some dough off of the scraper and work it back in. Look how clean that bowl is. Okay, whenever I take a loaf out of a stand mixer, I like to check it just to see what kind of a job it has done. This is beautiful. It started riding the roller at one point in time, and I just reached for my spatula, and it kind of self-corrected. So do you see this?
Yes.
Thank you. You're
Well, I wanted to let people know that. It's nice and stretchy.
Oh, Jim, what would I do without you?
I have no idea.
Live a happy, normal life, I think.
Probably. Whatever that means.
So it's very stretchy, it's very supple, very, very smooth. Okay, this is beautiful. So this bowl is clean enough. And I am just going to do a little spray. Give that a little spray on the top. And put it in here. And this has a little top hat that fits right over the top. And I'm going to let that rise. So I hope that this was helpful to you to see the difference between mixing and kneading in a stand mixer. It's not always easy to tell. And a lot of times when a recipe says, a lot of the recipes that in the books that I'm looking at use KitchenAids, and they will say, let the mixer run on low to medium for 8 minutes or 12 minutes. Can I just tell you that that is arbitrary? It's what works in their kitchen under the conditions that they were testing when they were developing the recipe. We need to, as bread makers, develop a sense of when the dough is ready. And it's great to be able to use stand mixers. It's also great to be able to mix it by hand if you are physically capable of doing that. I like the feel of the dough because that's how I tell. So we kind of need to learn how to read the dough, so to speak. And so when you are using a stand mixer for bread making, do it mindfully. Watch to see what is going on. Make sure that mixing picks up all of the flour and that you don't start the kneading until it's in a ball, almost a ball that can be beaten against the side of the bowl to create the gluten that is needed for a good strong rise in our breads. So I hope that this was useful to you, and we'll come back at some point with a full recipe of rye bread, and you can see the whole recipe from start to finish. So thanks for being with us, and we'll see you at our next video.